Tonight we're very fortunate to have both of these great writers in conversation about the work of Robert Stone, as well as a reading by Mr. Stone. So thanks for coming, and please help me welcome Robert Stone and Madison Smartt Bell.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming tonight. This concerns, just to give you a little bit of background, a young woman who is the daughter of a retired New York policeman who has become embittered for various reasons, some of them around what the New York cops call the pile, the Twin Towers. She is brilliant, feckless, fearless, in terrible trouble as a result of involving herself in the right to life issue at her campus, which is an elegant and traditional campus in what is now a dying mill town that has been in its place forever. Her father comes home from his day to discover that she has fled home to Queens, or at least retired home to Queens. And this is how he spends his day, discovering that she has returned. Eddie Stack, his name is Eddie Stack. Eddie Stack had developed an odd skill. He was able to comb his hair, what was left of it, without looking at his own face in the mirror. He kept his gaze above the hairline. Some foreign wit had observed that after 40, a man was responsible for his own face. Stack was over 40. In fact, he was just over 65. And he desperately did not want any more responsibilities beyond those he bore. The face wanted answering for. Young, he had never got enough of it. Don't think he hadn't looked in mirrors then. He had the deadpan, dumb Mick face that could be transformed within a fractal to the deadliest of satirical grins. And the assumed angry face, the hassled face, the put-upon, uncontainable rage face that would break his partners up in the middle of a collar. The false smiles and the semi-genuine smiles, and the honest smiles that were not entirely unstudied. Not until he had gone into the job had he realized how attractive he was to women. Most women kind of loved all police officers, but Detective Stack was envied in his appeal. There was also, he vaguely knew, a mug of true rage, and that was the one he never looked at, and yet privately had worn sometimes. His entire life was private now, and he knew he must wear it very often. Look at the face on him, his mother used to say, fondly. But the face on him now, the one he might have to avoid in the mirror, and the one he wore on the street was another matter. Richmond Hill was an immigrant neighborhood. Most people there now simply did not resemble him. They were not fair or tall. They were not bleeders, as white boxers had once been called in the fight game. When he wore his face on the street, a face now flayed by alcohol and high blood pressure and a volatile temperament, he could not imagine he was being spotted as a boozy Irishman, a slave to drink and an aging ruffian. To what might be on Lefferts Boulevard a stare of curiosity at one of the aboriginal occupants of Queens by a recently arrived Bengali or Mauritanian or Parsi, and those he suspected as despisers of his kind. He showed the watery blue eyes, the rosy face. His strategy was to take his glasses off so that he could not so that he could not see clearly the expressions of passers-by or his own reflection in store windows. Beyond his own front hedges, which he paid a friendly Ecuadorian to trim, he truly did feel responsible for his face. Almost, he thought, ashamed.
When I was a lad back in the 80s, I was a huge fan of Cormac McCarthy, and I participated briefly in a scheme to do a profile of McCarthy for Esquire, to which he politely didn't consent, and we entertained the idea of doing it without him, which is a dumb idea. It didn't go far, but in the course of that, I made one phone call, and this was when McCarthy was still a writer's writer, and not too many people knew about him. I called his then editor, Albert Erskine, who had retired, and he was a long time coming to the phone. And when he finally did get there, I stated my mission, and he took a breath, and he said, "I don't see why you people don't just read the damn books." And I thought, yeah, that's really a good point. I'm quitting this gig. But the reason I mention it is, sitting up here with one of the great writers of our time, there's a lot of questions that I'd like to ask that I really want to know the answer to, and yet I know the answer is in the book. So I have sort of soft questions and hard questions and slightly off the wall questions. And a slightly off the wall question I'll start with is captives, Indian captives, which I know you have an interest in, but in the very page one I've read at least this much. "You look like a white captive," Shelby said to Maud, and she's wrapped in an Indian blanket. And I know you have a long interest in the captive narratives, and in your setting, the school where this place is set has got a history from the colonial times of contention against the local Indians. And I just thought, since I have this opportunity, how does that play into the story?
It plays into the story. This begins with the opening line, as Maud, our character is Maud. Her roommate says to her as she sits after her shower with a Salish blanket wrapped around her, "You look like a white captive." And in a way, there is a chain of redemptive attention at redemption that's going on in this school. The school was established to convert the Indians, which immediately, of course, provoked deadly warfare in King Philip's War, provoked the first metal-headed axe to lodge itself in the first oak-proofed door. There is a constant chain of an attempt on everybody's part, in a way, to liberate everybody else. The most recent and dramatic occurrence of this was an attempt to open the campus to the community being a dying mill town. And the campus being a place increasingly provoking the rage of the traditional occupants of the town, who are descended from the Irish cops and Italian cops and unemployed mill hands and Hispanic workers. This rage continues and is often couched in the language of a kind of love. This is not, in its way, working out. And one of the things that haunts, and I don't want to go too much into the plot of the story. One of the things that haunts Eddie Stack is the fact that his brother-in-law is a notoriously corrupt cop who was under contract for collecting as many as stock certificates and examples of cash that could be found lying around in the pile. Well, this is kind of well known, not distinguished part of the story, but part of the story, and part of the money that added to Maud's National Merit Scholarship was money that was collected in the pile by various people who were under contract to various people to collect as much as they could collect. Stack, who is in his way, a deeply honest man, is pursued by the haunting of the possibility that someone was wreaking revenge, and will be wreaking revenge on his daughter for her participation, or her alleged participation in this plot. She is meanwhile deeply involved with a self-satisfied, quite arrogant professor in whose attraction she takes great satisfaction. The professor himself is married to a Canadian anthropologist woman. There is this chain of satisfaction, dissatisfaction, possible corruption, which goes deeper and deeper into the story, and is, in a way, the content of the story. I can't go. I don't want to go too deeply into it, because I don't want to give away what is, to some extent, a kind of whodunit. Although whodunit and what got done is kind of out there. But it is about, to the extent that it's about anything, this deeper and deeper channel of responsibility, love, and its playing out. Love is not the word, but a playing out of an attempt at redemptive forces. In a way, it's a very difficult book to talk about. I mean, Madison makes it easier. Because
let me see if I can proffer any more help. I actually wanted to ask you about Graham Greene. I'd never really thought of you in connection to Graham Greene before today. I was reading the book again on the train, and I thought of it in part because there's a lot of detritus of Catholicism lying around on the floor of this book, and sometimes being picked up and used pretty energetically by certain characters. And Greene, as a Catholic convert, we all know what he did with that, but also when I think of comparing him to you, he was a world traveler and a person who wrote about all the places he had been with a kind of attitude that I don't quite want to call cynicism, a certain pessimism informed in part by his temperament and in part by experience. And I noticed that your college professor, Brooklyn, who you just described in unfavorable terms, I'd see him a little bit more kindly than that. And in one of his dark hours, he's reading The Quiet American. So I just wondered, do you have any relationship to Greene?
I hate Greene.
Well, on to the
I
next
hate
question.
Greene. I hate Greene's soul. I hate his guts. I hate everything he represents. I hate his hatreds. I hate his contempts. I hate his falseness. I really have a deep despising of Greene. I mean, it's partly just pure nationalism. And it's partly the fact that I know, or claim to know, certain things about those bicycles that exploded, that he got allegedly killed for, and the plot, and the trip to Khartoum, which I happened to repeat the trip down to the cultist cathedral at Khartoum from Long Bin. So my feeling about Greene is really one of considerable despising, as I'm sure it would be about me. Although I don't compare, I can't I mean, Graham Greene was a really good writer. There's no way around it. I wish I could do something about that. But there isn't anything I can do about it. He was really a very fine novelist, a very fine and skilled novelist. I don't feel unconnected with Greene, but my connection with Greene is really one of hostility and rejection, because I think he made claims to knowledge and to insight that he was not properly entitled to, which leaves me in the position of having to claim those properties of knowledge and insight, which I don't know that I have the right to. I know that what this is about is America. It's not about anything that Greene wrote about. It's about a long chain that goes all the way back to that first Indian axe that hit that first Indian oak door. The motto of this college is something along the lines of darkness, being dispelled by light, which in this situation is an impossibility. In the period when the doors were thrown open and the locks were unlocked, what happened in the college was an incredible explosion of risk and crime and a falling apart of everything that the college had hoped for by opening itself to the community. In this situation, things tend, although not always, to fail. These gestures, these redemptive gestures, fail. There are other redemptive gestures which are important in the book, which do not fail. I never wrote a novel. I tried never to write a novel out of the corner of the eye of which something was to be perceived that was hopeful. And that is in here. This is probably, as dark, I suppose partly because it's about the pile, as darkly conceived as anything I ever wrote. But not altogether. I mean, what I try to keep writing about is hope in the face of the persistent failure of hope. And what I tried to put in here is a redemptive measure that somehow will come into fruition. I mean, it is dark, but it is not without hope. It has its mysteries. It has its empty gestures. It has its hopeful gestures. I think it really does speak as much as it can for itself. And it's very hard to place it, to take it and place it outside of its own context. So I feel, I have no choice but to fail to some degree in trying to talk about it. I can only hope that it provides what I mean it to provide, which is the paradox of hope and the failure of hope. I don't know if that's an answer, Madison, but it's.
Well, what the hell did I expect? At this point, before we turn it over to the audience, would you like another hairy, thorny question, or sort of a softball question?
No, I'll take the hairy question.
You want the hairy question?
Yeah.
All right.
But I like. Not
well,
that
I actually have two hairy questions, but what I was. On the train, it occurred to me to grab a copy of Bear and His Daughter and read Miserere, which is a short story about some renegade Catholic ladies who retrieve from medical waste bins aborted fetuses and bury them with all the sacraments. And this is the toughest story on that subject that you could ever possibly read or imagine. If you don't know it, I recommend it, but it's kind of hard going. This book also engages the politics and indeed the theology informing the politics of abortion very, very deeply, more than most people do. If you don't want to say anything about that, I understand. It's all in the book.
I'll try and answer it this way. These women. Well, this again hits the question of abortion and the opposition to it. I mean, I'm not, I am not pro-life. I am not anti-life. I believe in women's rights to control their lives. But the story that Madison is referring to is about women who are so deeply committed to the souls and the bodies and souls of aborted children that they take extraordinary measures to preserve them. And what I connect this with is something that I encountered once on a train. A British official known for his prominent Catholicism, and his wife and his 11-year-old child were being represented at a First World War memorial in Enniskillen, honoring the Enniskillen Fusiliers who had fought in the First World War in Flanders. And the result was that a rogue element of the IRA had set off a bomb to disrupt this ceremonial, in the course of which they succeeded in killing the well-known British Catholic official and blinding the 11-year-old boy, whose mother put him on a train to Lourdes, so that on this train, an 11-year-old blinded child, and you can imagine the situation of an 11-year-old blinded child, was on this train headed for Barcelona, passing through Perpignan, in the hope that somehow some miracle, some Catholic miracle, could restore sight to the child. People are always hoping that somehow out of some spiritual dimension or its absence, something redemptive. My wife hates this word. She has told me never to use it again in public, but anyway, I'm using it in public. Something redemptive will come forward. So that this is in a way about love, its failure, its hopes, its impossibilities, its possibilities, and also and death, hope and hopelessness. This again is, my trying to hoist an answer.
Well, my last question, which you have actually set up very nicely with a story about the bombing and the trip to Lourdes, is not even mine. It's asked by a character in the book, Joe Carr, who's reputed, I've read in the press, to be a reincarnation of Sister Justin from A Flag for Sunrise. I'm not sure I believe that, but she says, close to the end, history is poisoned by claims on underlying truth. We've both been burned by people who think they represent them. Underlying truth. Do you think any of these things are objectively out there?
And he replies, people always want their suffering to mean something, which in a way is a key line in the book. That people suffer. We suffer, we all suffer. We desperately want our suffering to mean something. And So it is with these people who love and want their love to mean something, want their suffering to mean something, want underneath the lives that we live to some spiritual existence to exist, to which we can turn, however rightly or wrongly, for some kind of redemptive process. We desperately want our suffering to mean something. And we can't make it do that. We cannot perforce make it do that. Now, I hope in this book, to illustrate the ways in which we can and cannot make our suffering mean something, and offer in that spirit, which I hope will lift us in the direction of that dimension. I always thought of writing or any art as a service. I mean, what gets you through, what gets us all through the world, is insight. And the only reason, I think, for the practice of art is insight, is the necessity for insight. Because there is no other way, in a way, of surviving life, except by turning to whatever dimension of the spirit we can find that provides us with insight. It's what I tried to do in this novel. Thank you very much. Thank you.